Do not steal. This is way bigger than shoplifting. Join us for this important conversation today on Family Vision.
Hi, my name is Ray Rienow. Welcome to Family Vision with my parents, Dr. Rob and Amy Rienow, strengthening families through practical, encouraging, and real conversations.
Rob and Amy Rienow here with Visionary Family Ministries. We love spending this time with you on the Family Vision podcast. We're continuing our series in the 10 Commandments. We are on Do Not Steal, talking about how these commandments shape our family life. But before we dive in today, just a quick welcome to a new member of the Visionary Family community, Eliane from Quebec, Canada.
I got to meet Eliane on my Shine group, and it was such a delight to get to know her. She has a fascinating story. She has done a lot of travel in her life to seek out the Lord, and is a believer, and we're just really excited to have her as part of the Visionary Family community.
That Shine group that you just led, that women's Bible study, was fantastic. Women from all over going through your Bible study, Shine, embracing God's heart for you. So ladies, if you are looking for a small group Bible study or just a Bible journey for yourself, make sure you check out Amy's book, Shine. And so, all right, we're back in 10 Commandments. Mm-hmm. Do not steal. We had, I don't want to call it stealing, but it's kind of on the edge of stealing with our granddaughter.
I think.
So just yesterday, AV, who will be turning 3 soon, was over, and we went down the basement to play with some toys, and she really likes Paw Patrol, and we have a lot of Paw Patrol toys from our children.
Yes.
So she comes into the room with the Paw Patrol toys, and she says, "Cap, where are the pups?"
And you texted me.
Right. Now, because I knew you had just organized the Paw Patrol area, and you just put all the pups in a bin so that they're all clear where they are. So I go over to the bin. There's just not a lot of pups in there, maybe one or something like that. And then I remember Avi has been harvesting,
gradually increasing her Paw Patrol collection at her house by taking home pups on a regular basis. And Lissy had just texted me a picture of her bathroom because Avi had lined up all of the Paw Patrol pups, and there were several. And she's like, pretty confident where all these came from. And yes, she has been gradually taking a few every time she comes over. And she brings her pups over in a bag. And so then she's playing with them all, and then all the pups go back in her bag and somehow get to her house.
Perhaps some pups from Amy and Cap's house.
She's following in her mother's footsteps. We used to call Lissy the smuggler because Lissy had a similar habit, a little younger than this age, but she'd be playing with like a toy in the store. And she'd have usually one in each hand. So I would take the toys out, put them down, put her in the stroller, and, we'd be headed out and back into the mall. And lo and behold, we're walking and, we're 20 minutes away from the store. I look down and the toy is in her lap. I'm like, wait a minute, how did that happen? We started calling her the smuggler. I don't know if you remember, because this was a repeated problem.
Or shoplifter.
But it wasn't just, it was like toys from grandma's house. We're like, wait, I took it out of your hand. I put it away. And then all of a sudden, somehow she got it back in. She's like the Artful Dodger back then. So yes, we have been dealing with this. So far with Avi, it's all just on a gracious. The pups are now at her house. They might come back and stay at our house for a little bit.
We've got a sleepover this weekend, so there's a plan to have some pups make their way home. All right, I thought, honey, we could start off by doing a classic game, a little quiz game for you of stealing, not stealing.
Okay.
I will give you the situation. You tell me if this is violating the 8th commandment. Okay, you're in the checkout line. Take your store. The person is scanning the products, right? Grocery store, for instance. Mm-hmm. You notice the scanner, it beeps but doesn't put your item up on the screen, and
Correct.
It goes into your cart.
Or it's in your cart. Or it's in your cart, yeah.
Yeah. And
that would be, if you see that something isn't picked up, like usually it's like something on the bottom of your cart or something,
yep.
Then yeah, I think that's stealing.
That's stealing, okay.
If you notice it, if you intentionally can see it in the moment, I would say that's not stealing. If you happen to get home and you have it and didn't know that it wasn't like a completely,
if you're unaware.
Completely unaware, then I would not call that stealing at all.
All right, I remember a time when RW was little, that happened, and kind of I pointed it out and explained to him, okay, yeah, we actually have to pay for things. All right, let me give you another situation.
Okay.
Your family is eating at Portillo's
Right.
or another restaurant. You order, you go get your bag of food, you bring it back, you find an extra hot dog in the bag, and you say, woohoo, look, they gave us an extra hot dog, and who wants it? Stealing or not stealing?
I would say that's not stealing because you're not going to give it back at this point. Like they would probably throw it away. Once the food's been given, you can't really give it back. So I would say no. But I'll tell you what is stealing. I have friends, my kids have told me about it. I won't mention the family, but they say that the dad intentionally orders wrong in the drive-thru, intentionally, so that when he gets his order, he'll say, oh, that's not what I wanted, or that was the wrong thing, and then they have to redo it, and then he ends up getting more than one.
That's both breaking the 8th commandment and the 9th commandment. You're stealing and lying.
I shouldn't laugh at that. And they said that that's the joke. And maybe it was an accident. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt there. But I think that was interesting. that was the assessment from the kids.
Okay, another one. You're at the restaurant. You've had a couple refills on your drink, and now you ask for a refill to go.
Of course that's not stealing. Why would you bring that up?
Feels like stealing
it's
to
not
me.
Stealing. You didn't.
It feels like that crosses a line.
You're trying to accuse me of something, which you said the story wrong. I didn't have a couple refills of my drink. I drink incredibly slowly.
That's a true statement.
By the time I'm having like
it's
half.
really just your second.
It's just
it's
my
just
second.
Your first refill to go.
Correct. Because I drink so slowly and I'm a sipper. And you've already had like 3 refills at the table. Is that stealing? Is free refills like.
I think we should
that
move
be
on.
endless?
My point
Luckily,
with this
how it changes quickly.
The game, this classic game of stealing, not stealing, is not easy. It's a little bit complicated. Okay. Well, let's get back. What we've been doing in this series is we've been taking one episode to sort of talk about the principle of the commandment with some examples. But then we come back for round 2, which we will do next week, and talk about practically what this looks like in our families and in our parenting specifically. But one of the theological or biblical principles that's rooted in this commandment, do not steal, is that private property is a biblical principle. Mm-hmm. Private land ownership is a biblical principle. If people don't have private property, then there's no use to have the commandment, do not steal, because things belong to people. Things belong to your neighbor that don't belong to you. And of course, this gets into a larger philosophical, economic conversation about Marx and communism. But the early Christians...
You mean Karl Marx?
Karl Marx, yeah.
Yes, who argued that really no one should have private property. That was one of his central arguments, that the government should own everything and the government should disperse it to each person evenly. So that really does – I don't think we think about the fact that general idea of setting up an economy that way would be antithetical to God's commandments.
Right. So the early Christians had private property, and they shared their private property generously with each other. Right.
So I think this is an important thing that you've hit on, because I think we take for granted that we live in a culture that has upheld this law of do not steal, and that is consistent with the 10 Commandments, but also consistent with Western Christian culture, that stealing is wrong. But I think because stealing is often maybe not a violent, not an act of violence or a crime of violence, that as cultures slip, and especially we see this in Europe in particular, that stealing all of a sudden becomes, on the scale of laws, like not as a big of a deal. And it's interesting, whenever you're traveling to Europe, you will always get comments like, as a woman, watch your purse. Like, you have to have different precautions, because stealing and, pickpocketing, those types of crimes are much more rampant, I guess is the word, because they're not really prosecuted. And it kind of goes to the point where, well, stealing is just not that big of a deal. Yet it is an example of an erosion of Christian culture, where you get to the point where these things aren't prosecuted. And in contrast, we live in a town which has a strong Christian heritage. You see that there's still reminiscent of a strong do not steal principle. I mean, we go someplace and say, the local hardware store leaves all their lawn furniture out all summer long. You know what I mean? They don't lock it up or anything. It's just there, assuming that people aren't going to steal. Or you put your lawn chairs out for the 4th of July parade 2 days before. Just leave it out there. And again, there's this strong sense that, well, you wouldn't take that because it's wrong. Like, you expect people to behave according to this commandment, even when it's not necessarily even being enforced, because that's how strong that do not stealing has existed in Christian cultures.
Yeah, and as our culture slips from its Christian base, you're starting to see slippage there. We are blessed to live across the street from a police officer, one of our neighbors, and he was telling me about even the ways the laws and prosecutions have changed with shoplifting. So he got called to Costco for a shoplifter. Now, he's in Cook County. It's different in Cook County, which is the Chicago County versus DuPage, where we are. But he got called to a Cook County, a guy is walking out of Costco with car batteries in his cart. He just walked out, didn't pay for them. They called the police. So he comes up to the guy, and he has to try and account for how much money is being stolen. If it's less than $500, he can't do anything.
Yeah, he just lets the guy
go.
Take it.
Yep.
Which is that slippage, which already has obviously occurred. We should point that this do not stealing is not just Christian culture. For example, in a Muslim culture, you can still have, or is it Singapore? I mean, there's huge, very, very, I don't know if they're cutting off your hand, but I just remember that.
Back in the day.
But yes, back in the day for sure. But I think, I know you were saying in Singapore, even that there was such strong
stiff penalties.
Stiff penalties for stealing. And it's interesting that it's slipped in a lot of Western cultures and in America as well.
Yeah. But it's not just stealing things that this commandment applies to. Kind of like we've looked at all the other commandments. Do not commit adultery is a lot more than cheating on your spouse, right? It's about sexual immorality and sexual faithfulness and all of that. So one of the ways that kids struggle with stealing is cheating in school.
Like plagiarism.
Plagiarism. You don't think of it as do not steal, but recent survey, 95% of teens admitted to having cheated, taking other people's work or on tests or papers. I can certainly remember, I'll speak for myself, as a junior high school student, on test day, I've got my test in front of me, and my very smart friend sitting next to me has his test there, and my eyes creeping over and grabbing some answers. I'm sure you never did that.
I know. I did do that. I'm saying for sure I did that. Yes.
And now with AI, that's taking this whole stealing plagiarism question to a whole new level and asking the computer to write your papers for you and turning in other people's work.
Well, I was thinking of this in reference to cheating in sports too, and how that is a form of stealing, because you're stealing the opportunity for a team to win on good merit and good competition. We've seen that, with steroids or drugs, but there's all sorts of ways. Like, I think you had an example of the baseball draft, like people be doing things where they are kind of cheating the system, we could call it. And it's a form of stealing an opportunity from other kids to win fairly. When you do things to stack the cards in your favor, you are stealing at that point. I love how you have pirating songs and movies. I know back in our day we did that constantly on audio tapes and shared that with friends.
The double cassette player.
Yes, and you recorded.
Dubbing your mixtape.
And I still have a hard time calling that stealing, but it was a form of stealing.
Everybody did it. So our consciences
it.
were significantly dulled on
right.
that subject.
Right. But you've seen that different now with, we don't have that ability to do that. But I think that's an interesting thing, like the pirating songs and movies.
Well, with music and movies, we just think everything should be free.
Right.
Like these artists made this to sell it,
right,
at their concerts or on their CDs or MP3 downloads or Apple Music or Spotify or whatever.
Right.
But we just think, I ought to be able to listen to anything that somebody else made, watch anything that somebody else made, and never pay for it.
Right. That is true. That's what we think. So,
you mentioned the sports thing. Another one we're seeing in the headlines most days right now is men playing women's sports, right? A man who says, I'm a girl, feel like a girl, trapped in the wrong body, whatever, so I want to play against the girls in track or swimming. I think I see those on the news the most. And, of course, they take the podium. Well, they stole. They stole the the glory, if you will, from the girls in the race, the opportunity to win. We've seen people like lose out on scholarships or lose out on chances to get to the national tournament because it was stolen from them.
Yeah, so I think it's just interesting that this is a commandment that we're going to talk more about next week and how it applies in our own homes. But there are ramifications when we ignore this commandment. And we've already talked about how there's ramifications in culture, and we've seen that slippage. And it's something that's evidence of a culture that are not in line with God's commandments. There's a reason these 10 commandments exist. There's a reason that he gave that to us, not just as individuals, but communities, because they work better when you follow these commandments. Like, for example, Wheaton is a very nice place to live. And because people generally honor the do not steal commandment. Now, I'm not saying that stealing doesn't happen. I'm just saying you have this strong moral sense that you shouldn't take something. And it's nice to live in a community like that. It's nice where you don't have to think about, oh, I left my purse and that I, back at this restaurant, and I'm confident that people aren't going to take something out of it. If I go back there right away, most likely nice person's going to return it.
Right. And that's part of the mission here at Visionary Family Ministries. Building strong Christian families leads to strong churches, which leads to strong Christian communities and nations and the overflow of the gospel. We love this time with you on Family Vision, but we'd like to see you in person. In fact, if you live in the Midwest, we could see you this weekend. I'll be speaking at the Homeschool Iowa Conference this first weekend in June. And then I'd like to ask for you to consider supporting a really important family mission that we have coming up in July. Amy and I and 4 of our kids are going to be leading a family mission trip to the Dominican Republic. One of the hearts that we've had as a ministry, you've got youth mission trips and you've got adult mission trips, but not a lot of family trips. And so at VFM, we've had a heart to plan these and develop these. And so we have partnered with Michelle and Paul Ferguson at Filter of Hope. And we're going to be leading families to the Dominican Republic July 5 to 11 to be installing clean water filters in homes and sharing the good news of Jesus through that service ministry. And we would be grateful for your help. We'd love for you to pray for us, and we'd love for you to consider supporting us financially. If you'd like to help our whole team and all these families, bless these families in the Dominican Republic, you can just go to our website, visionaryfam.com. In the upper right, there is the Support the Mission button. You can click that, make a donation, help it be possible for our families to serve these families in the Dominican Republic.
One reason our ministry is moving in this direction of family mission trips is because we have seen the benefit and the blessing that come from doing missions as a team. Rob used to lead, we both led youth ministry missions trips for 10 years in the early part of our marriage. And, when you go on a missions trip together, you learn to serve together, to work together, to sacrifice together, and people's hearts become much more connected. And that is one of the reasons we desire for families to have these opportunities to do this as a family, because it's really a life-changing experience, not just for the people you're going to serve, but also for those of us who are doing the serving.
And you can also partner with us to help us reach more families around the world just by clicking that follow button, that share button, leaving a review. That helps YouTube and Apple and Spotify share this with more families. And as always, we'd love to hear from you personally. If you have prayer requests or just responses to today's conversation, you can email those to us at podcast@visionaryfam.com. And we look forward to our next time together with you on Family Vision.